We all know that Tyrannosaurus rex is, quite possibly, the most famous dinosaur of all time. But where did it come from? Well, it might shock you to learn it was from small beginnings. We have fossils of the ancestors of the mighty T-Rex going back throughout the Cretaceous, and they steadily get smaller as we go down the family tree. So, what was at the Tyrannosaurus family tree's base? Which was the first? To quote the very first episode of Walking with Caveman, but supposing we could go back not just one generation, or 2 generations, or even 3 generations, but 300 generations, or 3,000, back to 100,000 generations, if not more. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Travel back to the Cretaceous, and go from the Tyrannosaurus rex, the king, down its family line, all the way back to the literal dawn tyrant, Eotyrannus, in the Early Cretaceous, and see where tyrannosaurs had their beginnings. Could Eotyrannus be a dinosaur that set so much in motion and would lead to the king of dinosaurs in the Late Cretaceous millions of years after it was gone? The little dinosaur that made so much possible? Or did it? We're not just going to take an in-depth look at this dinosaur, but we're also going to address if this actually is the ancestor of Tyrannosaurus rex at all. It's much more ancient than T-Rex, yes, but did it lead to the king of dinosaurs, or is it something else? An offshoot, a cousin, or ancestor? Where in the family tree does it go? I hope this question sounds interesting to you. So today, you're going to meet an obscure dinosaur from the Early Cretaceous, and the question of the day surrounding it that we will examine is if it is an ancestor to the Tyrannosaurus rex. This video should be super interesting. Is this animal an ancestor to the T-Rex? The answer might surprise you. Let's just say that evolution doesn't work in a straight line. If you enjoy videos on paleontology, I'll link my other ones in the description. We've addressed a similar question in my video on Auroran, if that was one of our ancestors or an offshoot, and now we're doing the same thing with the T-Rex. I cover a lot of topics when it comes to paleontology, and I hope you'll check them out. Like and subscribe so that I know you like this kind of video and you want to see more of it. Also, check out my narration of my original dinosaur-filled story that my avatar, Spino, is from. Please, he is very chastised over the fact I'm talking about a Tyrannosaur instead of a Spinosaur. I'll link it below too. And let's start the video off with a description of Eotyrannus, and then we'll cover some of its fossils and how they were found. Yes, Spino. Look at its fluffy feathers. So, this is Eotyrannus, the dawn tyrant, the possible distant ancestor of the T-Rex from millions of years earlier. First topic of discussion, its biology. Now, the paleobiology of this animal is a bit dubious, since we have so few fossils of it. There is a lot of guesswork here. Like with Auroran, if you remember that video. Or Helicoprion, if you remember that one instead. If you recall there, for the longest time, we didn't even know how that one's teeth fit into its mouth. Eotyrannus, though, likely was similar to other early tyrannosaurs as far as diet, behavior, and lifestyle went. And by that, I mean likely more akin to those of the smaller ones that were earlier on rather than the larger theropods that came about later in the Cretaceous. So let's bring up a sample from a pool of early tyrannosaurs. Tyrannosaurs have a high body mass even compared to other theropods, and this is seen in almost all of them, so we can assume it applied to Eotyrannus too. But what more can we gather from Tyrannosaurs as a whole? Let's have a look at Stokiosaurus, an early tyrannosaur as well. In fact, it's one of the earliest. Let's look at how it lived, as it might be similar to how Eotyrannus lived. Eotyrannus was larger, but we can still make the comparison. Living about 150 million years ago, Stokiosaurus is a small early tyrannosaurid from the late Jurassic period that lived in Utah. Like with Eotyrannus, the holotype specimen was not an adult, but a juvenile. Early on, this early tyrannosaur could not be put into a certain family, but interestingly, it was found that this animal and Eotyrannus actually share some features, including a posterodorsally inclined ridge on the lateral side of the ilium. Now, this was a very early tyrannosaur, very close to the base of the family tree as a whole, and it lived in a flourishing world. It likely hunted and maybe even preyed upon animals in a similar way to Eotyrannus. It may be more likely to have eaten early mammals since it was smaller than the larger dinosaur. We'll cover Eotyrannus' diet in a few minutes, but for now let's focus on using early Tyrannosaurs to fill in some of the blank spaces on the map that is Eotyrannus. But also something that should be noted is just because you're similar doesn't mean your diet and lifestyles were. And that is important to remember. I do a lot of speculatory behavior estimates in these kinds of videos, and this is no exception. For example, early in human evolution, when there were all kinds of hominids across Africa that branched off from shared ancestors, they all lived their own lifestyles and maybe ate different types of food compared to others. Some ate food others couldn't eat, and some met animals that others didn't, which affected their lives and behaviors. Man, I'm pulling from all the knowledge I've gained in my last paleo videos for this one. I feel like this is my final exam. Some early mammals this animal lived alongside of, and probably ate, included docodonts, symmetrodonts, and tongue twister, try saying this 5 times fast. Docodonts, symmetrodonts, and triconodonts. It is likely that these early tyrannosaurs had similar lifestyles as a whole. Being smaller compared to other tyrannosaurs of the Late Cretaceous, they likely faced the same type of hardships in life. But that is an estimated guess. Again, their lives could be very different for the reasons I mentioned a minute ago when mentioning hominids. By the way, this is all still in relation to Stachyosaurus. We'll cover all of this when it comes to Eotyrannus in just a minute. Early basal tyrannosaurs have fossil evidence of being feathered, such as DeLong. Eotyrannus likely had at least some feather covering on its body as well. Later tyrannosaurs, though likely did not. At least this is suggested by fossilized skin that we have, though it is also possible that they retained feathers on different parts of the body, as the skin impressions we have are from only a few limited spots, some of which are unlikely to have had feathers at all. Feathers are also not limited to the smaller animals in the superfamily. Larger early tyrannosaurs are also known to have had feathers. These dinosaurs likely had feathers all across their bodies. Using early tyrannosaurs as a pool to draw from, we can look at common traits shared by most to get an idea into what Eotyrannus' biology might have looked like. With its fossils being so fragmentary, we can only really guess right now. So now, let's get back to the main dinosaur this video focuses on. The world Eotyrannus lived in is thought to have been warm and humid, comparable to how the Mediterranean is today. It is thought that, based on the fossils we have from the formation the Dawn Tyrant was found in, the weather didn't have high levels of seasonal rain. However, we know that there was a wet season because of the fungal decay in plant material from the plant debris beds. These signs of fungal decay occur frequently in the beds as well, indicating an annual wet season. There is also evidence the region was fire and drought resistant. Some of the animals Eotyrannus shared its world with were the Spinosaurids, Rhiparovenator, and Ceratopsuchops, and also the Neovenator, which is a pretty well-known dinosaur. Another well-known dinosaur that Eotyrannus lived alongside of was the Iguanodon. Other dinosaurs also included Bristonius, Mantellisaurus, and Valdosaurus, along with several sauropods and one ankylosaur called Polacanthus, which, hey, I know that one. Anyone who grew up with Walking with Dinosaurs should. There were also mammal species that were likely prey to Eotyrannus, as I mentioned earlier, so your and mine distant ancestors. But hey, technically yours lived because you're here now watching this video. I'm going to move on now before I fill you with existential dread. But we really are more lucky to be here than we'll ever truly know. Some of the mammals included Eobatar and Yaverlistius. I hope that's right. I don't know why they insist on giving these tiny little mammals the most convoluted names ever. Now, I'm not actually going to go into detail about any of these dinosaurs or mammals, because you'll probably remember I'm doing a big Cretaceous fauna project eventually, probably this winter, and I'm going to need 60 animals to talk about because it's going to be a full-length, multi-part documentary about the animals that existed throughout the Cretaceous. Just know that they were prey to dinosaurs. Mammals were definitely not the top at this time. If I decide to cover these guys in that video, we can all learn about them together then. But for now, let's move on to the discovery of the fossils. So, we don't actually know where this animal was found. The exact location of the holotype specimen has not been revealed for a few reasons. One is due to its importance, apparently, and the possibility of new material to be collected as the coastline recedes. So fair enough. I guess they want to keep it a secret so random people can't just walk in and maybe walk out with the only fossils and fragments of what could be new specimens of Eotyrannus or new species altogether. But hey, from what we know, the specimen was found on the Isle of Wight, which, hey, that's a familiar name. We talked about that in another video. Look at that. That's cool. It's a small world sometimes. A single claw was the first fossil discovered in an excavation of the site, and from there more bones were found shortly afterward. The fragmentary specimen was heavily researched by scientists from the University of Portsmouth, in Portsmouth, England, and from the Natural History Museum in London, England. 6 years later, in 2001, the fossils were given a name, Eotyrannus, and in 2022, a monograph of the animal was finally published. A monograph is basically just a write-up on a subject, typically by a single author. Now, on screen is a reconstruction of the skeleton based on what few bones we actually have of it. We really always seem to just talk about the fragmentary animals here, don't we? Now, let's actually have a good look at this animal before we start addressing where it fits in the family line of Tyrannosaurs and if it is in fact an ancestor of the king. So, Eotyrannus is a very fragmentary dinosaur, but we know a few vital things about it from our limited fossil bones. And in fact, from these limited bones, we can see that this animal has several traits unique to it when compared to other Tyrannosaurs. For example, just looking at the holotype specimen, we see that the rostral end of the dentary possesses a concave notch, and this notch houses the mesial, the direction toward the anterior midline in a dental arch. The rostromesial margin of the notch also has a dorsally directed prong that curves laterally. This is just one example of an odd feature compared to other known Tyrannosaurs. Now, an unfortunate thing about the holotype specimen, aside from being fragmentary, is how spread apart it was. Prior to being fossilized, the animal was disarticulated, likely being scavenged by other animals. Parts of its skeleton were scattered all around the formation it was found in. However, again, we can learn a few vital things about the specimen from just a few broken pieces. One thing we know is that the holotype specimen was an individual who was not yet fully mature by the time it died. The adult size of the animal would be larger than the specimen we have, even if it had been fully intact. It is thought that the holotype individual represents a subadult of the species. However, on the flip side of that coin, fragmentary remains can also make certain bones hard to identify. There are pieces of the cranium that we can't identify in this animal, and a few other pieces that were originally identified when the specimen was first found have also since been figured out to have been wrong. Anyway, Eotyrannus was a theropod carnivorous dinosaur, and it had a slender-built body and was able to grasp prey with its long arms. So, the big question this whole video has been building up to. Is this animal an ancestor to the T-Rex from hundreds of thousands of generations before? Is this the one, out of all the early Tyrannosaurs that existed at this time that we have to choose from? No. At most, it just shares a direct common ancestor with the T-Rex. And for a very specific reason. Eotyrannus lived in Europe in the early Cretaceous, and T-Rex lived in North America at the end of the Late Cretaceous. These two continents were already split apart by the time Eotyrannus evolved, so there is no way for it to have been a direct ancestor of the T-Rex. Now, before doing this, I didn't know there were Tyrannosaurs in Europe. I thought they were exclusive to North America. So I began my research thinking that maybe this was T-Rex direct ancestor, especially with its name being Tyrant, but it's not. They're the same family of dinosaurs. They'd both have evolved from a shared ancestor, but these two are not in the same line. They're part of different branches of the Tyrannosaur family tree. Now, here's a fun fact. One of the most identifiable features of the T-Rex were its tiny arms with 2 fingers. Well, as I mentioned, Eotyrannus had long arms and its hands had 3 fingers instead of 2. Now, on screen is a family tree. As you can see, all these animals, and Eotyrannus is basically a distant cousin of the line that led to Tyrannosaurus rex. It's part of the Tyrannosaur superfamily, but not the line that led to T-Rex, as I said earlier. A 2022 study concluded that Eotyrannus should be classified as an intermediate glacial tyrannosaurid, one that is more closely related to the true tyrannosaurids, but one that lacks some of the features found on the more advanced members of the extended family tree. This also leads to a theory that megaraptors might be tyrannosaurids. Eotyrannus was also thought to be a megaraptor at one point, but this seems to not be the case. So, Eotyrannus is not the ancestor of the T-Rex. The two share a common ancestor, but are part of 2 different lines of the Tyrannosaur superfamily. Its line did not lead to the king of dinosaurs, and by the time T-Rex would come to be, this magnificent animal would be long gone. The legacy it left behind was not the king of dinosaurs, but instead the fragmentary, fossilized bones. Well, that's going to do it, and I hope you are all paying attention. It's time for your pop quiz. Please close your notebooks and take out a paper and number it 1 to 10. Okay, I'm just kidding. What I do hope is that you found this deep dive into the family tree of the T-Rex as interesting as I did. I never knew there were Tyrannosaurs outside of North America. Tyrannosaurs are actually a family group that I don't really research that much, so there's a lot that I don't know. I knew some that lived outside of North America, but I didn't know they lived outside of North America. So this was a very interesting video to research, and it's one of the reasons I love these kinds of videos. I get to learn about so many amazing animals I didn't know about, like Gracopithecus, Auroran, Smock, Anatosuchus, and of course, Eotyrannus. While it wasn't an ancestor of the T-Rex, it is still a fascinating animal, even if it didn't live on in the king of dinosaurs millions of years after it was gone. And I can't believe it was found on the Isle of Wight of all places, too. That's hilarious that that little island came up again in one of these documentary videos. I promise I did not do that on purpose. That was a genuine shock for me that we ended back on the same little isle of all the places on Earth. If you want to see my last video that we talked about the Isle of Wight, then check out my video on the HMS Eurydice, a ghost ship witnessed by Winston Churchill. I'll link it in the description. It's a very interesting story. As for the next video, while we're on the topic of ships, I'm not going to say what it is just yet, but you all seem to really like the ship videos, so I think you're really going to like this one if you do. It's a fascinating story that you probably have not heard before, but you most likely have heard what came about because of this ship. Until then, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a good one. Expect videos to start coming on a more weekly basis now because I now have a job and I cannot dedicate as much time in a single day to make these as I used to. But nonetheless, I will still make them the best that I can, and until the next one, as always, thank you for watching. The rostromesial margin of the notch also has a dorsally... Oh, trying to record a video with Tank in the house is so difficult. And there he goes again. Bark, bark, bark. Still barking. Ugh, dog, give it up. The squirrels do not care that you're barking at them.